Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming to hear about this. I'm very pleased to be here to share with you some of the research that I did on the Library Scholars Grant last summer at the Center for Jewish History in New York City. I applied for this grant to begin archival research on a project I'm calling Across the Iron Curtain. And this project, I put here, this project examines the efforts of Jews remaining inside Cold War-era Eastern Bloc countries to maintain contact with relatives, friends, and international Jewish organizations outside of it, and their implications for Jewish state relations. And I want to tell you that Jewish existence in Eastern and Central Europe did not end after the Second World War, but it was radically and tragically transformed. And beyond the large-scale devastation of the Holocaust, this transformation included extensive global dispersion of the surviving Jewish population. So this study is organized around the tensions between the efforts of Jews on both sides of the Iron Curtain to remain in contact versus the perceptions of the Jewish population in Eastern Europe as an a priori disloyal element for various reasons. There are political reasons, reasons of class, and largely also because of these contacts abroad. So this is a fundamental element of the project. Population displacement in the early post-war period. This is these few chaotic years between the end of the Second World War and the consolidation of Stalinist dictatorships in the newly defined Eastern Europe is the crucial first step of this project. Okay, so this will be a book-length project that I'm tentatively calling at this point Across the Iron Curtain. And this is the first step has to do with this immediate post-war context, the situation in the displaced person camps and that dispersion. Population displacement after the war reveals afresh the extent of wartime devastation. It gives us a greater perspective into this large-scale devastation brought on by the war and the process of reconstruction post-war. I located a unique source held by the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research, which is a partner organization of the Center for Jewish History in New York. This is the website of the Center for Jewish History. There are 5 partner organizations at the Center for Jewish History. There's the YIVO, which deals primarily with Jews from Eastern Europe and Jews who would be Yiddish-speaking. There's the Leo Baeck Institute, which is primarily German-speaking Jews, the American Jewish Historical Society, the Sephardic Jewish Association, and the Yeshiva University Museum. The Jews that I study are primarily Hungarian-speaking Jews, Czech and Slovak Jews, and they fall somewhere in between. So I have to use resources from the YIVO archives, Leo Baeck, and the American, which has many resources from the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, which was a major Jewish humanitarian aid organization, still exists, came into being during the First World War. And the source that I located there for this project is called Displaced Person Camps and Centers in Austria, the records 1945 through 51. This is a very large collection that has been put onto microfilm because of the fragile state of the materials. It consists of 23 microfilm reels and 603 folders on those reels with materials related to the care, accommodation, emigration, employment, the social, political, and religious life of Jewish DPs, as well as post-war anti-Semitism. YIVO obtained the materials between 1946 and 1960, and they were gathered by local YIVO samlers. All right, the samlers are the collectors. So these are not professionals. We're not talking about professional archivists, but people, usually survivors, who felt this need to. There's a book recently published called "Collect and Record," which every scrap of paper had to be collected, recorded, to bear witness, to cherish the memory of those who had perished. Okay, now no discussion of East Central Europe worth its salt lacks maps, so I'm going to show you 2. The first one is of post-war Europe. And it shows the Allied occupation zones in Germany and Austria. Okay, so in September 1945, about 1 to 1.2 million people remained displaced in Europe, following the largely successful efforts of the US military authorities and the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, known as UNRWA, efforts to repatriate the 11 million displaced at the war's end. So within that brief amount of time, it had gone down from 11 million displaced to about 1 million displaced. That's often referred to as the last million. The number increased again with the arrival of about 12 million ethnic Germans who were expelled or fled from Eastern Europe after the war, followed by opponents of the nascent Stalinist East Central European regimes, and then by Polish, Hungarian, Romanian, Czech, and Slovak Jews who did not want to return home. So the number goes way up again. Right, this is the second map. And this map shows the location of these major Jewish DP camps and centers. The DP countries, as they were called after the war, were Germany, Austria, and Italy. At first, US military authorities did not recognize Jews as a distinct group to be handled separately, and Jewish DPs were heedlessly housed with people who had persecuted them during the war. This changed after the report of Earl Harrison, always referred to as the Harrison Report. It was a report to President Truman concerning the mistreatment and poor conditions of non-repatriable Jews. After the Harrison Report, Jews were housed in separate camps and referred to under the classification Jewish. So this became very important. So this shows that map. Okay, so my research focuses on the experience of Hungarian Jewish refugees in the DP camps in Austria as the common border between Hungary and Austria gradually closed. I primarily studied the materials about the DP camps and centers in the collection mentioned previously, but I also studied materials from the Hebrew Sheltering and Immigrant Aid Society collection, called the Hayes Haisem collection, and this was in the collection that's labeled Hayes Haisem, France 4. The main European office of Haisem was located in Paris, and this is a central place for the correspondence with the New York branch, the London, Prague, Budapest, and all throughout. And this, we see that the correspondence concerning immigration, domestic conditions, aid, correspondence, and tracing. A great deal of the material that you find in the Hayes Haisem collection is queries, people looking for other family members and friends to locate them. And there's also many lists of immigration records. So there's a great deal of sifting that happens when you go through that material. Based on the research that I did last summer, I prepared a paper for this conference, which took place last month at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. It was on March 19th, 2014, or this year. And it was a conference about the Holocaust in Hungary 70 years later, as we approach that mark. The Holocaust Museum has been having, for the past few decades, every 10 years, there's a conference and public program marking the next decade. And at this conference, they're looking to showcase new kinds of work that's being done in the field. So for what I was looking for during this research was the right angle for that presentation as well. I knew that presentation was coming up rather quickly. And it was a presentation about the experience of Hungarian Jewish DPs in Austria and their contact with relatives and friends in Hungary. So how would I do that? What kind of angle would I find? And so this is the surprise find. This made me very happy in the archives. This is the kind of thing that you hope to find. There were several folders of correspondence which had not been delivered. And this is where we, as historians, get to put our prying eyes on people's personal correspondence. When it's censored, it's not delivered, and there have been several classic studies that deal with either censored letters or materials that weren't delivered. So I was very happy to find those, and this is what they look like. Unfortunately, I was, envious of the handwriting you were talking about, because, the handwriting is often not very good, and here, these are just a few examples of the nicer handwriting. There are a lot of colloquialisms. We're dealing with a polyglot population that's primarily using Hungarian, but there are other words and phrases from other languages which have tacked on Hungarian endings and so on. So it's difficult, but this is a collection of letters that were addressed to Hungarian Jewish DPs at the Austrian camp. And it was sent from friends and relatives wherever they were. And now in this collection, in the folders 448 through 452, there are letters in other languages as well. So we're looking at letters being sent in Yiddish, primarily in German, and then there was this large stack of Hungarian language letters. And there have been people who've done research into the Yiddish letters, done research into the German letters, but no one looked at the Hungarian letters yet. So this is something which was also very interesting. For the purposes of that paper, for the conference at the museum, I narrowed it down to correspondence across the Iron Curtain. So deliberately across that Austro-Hungarian border, from the friends and relatives in Hungary writing to the relatives in Austria. Okay, and what I discovered is that the bulk of these letters were located at the Enns transit camp. Right, this is in Upper Austria in the American zone of occupation, and it's a place that becomes central to the story of Hungarian Jewish refugees after the war, because Hungarian is a lesser spoken language. It's the DP camp authorities combined these Hungarian speakers into one location. All right, so I use Enns as a fixed point in this story of Hungarian Jews' attempts to map and travel the paths of adaptation to their shattered world as the Iron Curtain drew down. What I'm going to do with you now is share some of these key findings of the research. And I think this will be the most interesting thing I can do right now. So my paper for the conference at the United States Holocaust Museum represents a beginning examination of that Hungarian Jewish refugee experience, examined through the prism of contact, drawing on this forgotten cache of undelivered mail addressed to Hungarian Jewish refugees who sojourned at this transient camp at Enns, also called Green Shelter, number 106 in Upper Austria. And so the first point is this idea that Enns was this gathering point for the Hungarian-speaking refugees. And I discovered this through comparison with other materials and where it had been done. So based on the prevalence of Hungarian language materials at Enns, in comparison with the other DP camps and centers, statistical data on arrivals, lists of names, and other evidence including meeting minutes, protocols, and this largely Hungarian language cache of mail, Enns appears to have been the central gathering point for Hungarian-speaking Jewish refugees in the Austrian DP camp system. Hungarian Jews were active in the camp leadership, and we know also from records and minutes that there were many tensions with Polish Jews at Enns, who resented the assimilationists in positions of control. So this is where we get to this larger classification as Jewish, right? You remember that after the Harrison report, there was a separation of DPs, and there were separate camps that were designed for Jewish DPs. Now, for Hungarian Jews, classification within the broader category of Jewish in the DP camp system after the Harrison report was a pronounced rupture in the Hungarian Jewish self-identification experience. Their wartime experience and then the post-war policy toward them, the aid available to them, including an 800-calorie supplement to their camp diet for recovery, the parameters of their post-war fate, the view of the surrounding society, the options before them, and how they shaped their strategies for rebuilding their lives were based upon their classification as Jewish, however they wished to interpret or act on that classification. Unlike Jews from elsewhere in Eastern and Central Europe, this historically assimilationist Jewish population had energetically rejected being classified as Jewish in national terms during the interwar period. So while Jews from Poland had Jewish nationality during the interwar period, Jews from Czechoslovakia had Jewish nationality or could choose Jewish as a nationality option. Hungarian Jews had refused it because they wished only to be Hungarian and not excluded from that national circle as they saw it. Now Jewish classification was a marker used to accommodate their specific needs and concerns by the American occupational authorities and the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, which plainly intersected with their own understanding of the real options before them and what path they may beat away from Hungary and away from ENS. Jewish, for them, became a practical and not ideological or religious marker. So it was a strategic marker. If you're identified as Jewish, then HIAS is going to help you immigrate. You're identified as Jewish, it means you're going to get an extra supplement to your diet and so on. And then the third part, this other key finding is uncovering the survivors' voices from the letters. And I think really this is the most interesting part. It's the most human part of the story, is actually hearing the voices of people. So what I'm going to do now, I'd like to read you a few excerpts from those letters. And as we have this is an image from ENS camp. Right. My dear Erwin, wrote Eva in mid-August 1946 from Budapest. I received 3 of your letters and a card today. I was so anxious, wondering what happened to you and why you did not write. I received a letter today from Bela, too. He writes that when you get there, he will have all the papers you need. If you think I do not miss you, you are very wrong, because I think of you all the time. I do not go anywhere. As we discussed at noon, I always think of you. I was at your mom's apartment the day before yesterday. She was very happy. I ate apple soup, melon, and plum. I think everyone is surprised that you left. I barely believe it. My dear sweet one, I'm worried about you. Do not catch a cold. Take care of yourself. Get some warm things. Do you still have your boots, or did they get destroyed? I washed and ironed your laundry and put it away. Write a lot and fast. Kisses from your loving Eva. What I'd like to point out in the letters, this one is from 46, but as we move from 46 to 47, we see a change in the tone of the letters, moving from this wider net of topics, including concern about the addressee's whereabouts and health, passing on valuable travel information and news about visas, quotas, and conditions, and who can help them reach their destinations, to reports on efforts to be in touch, to send packages, to take care of any favors, to send love and kisses, telling them about new babies coming into the world and how deeply they are missed. And we see more and more movement to an increasingly concerted effort to entice them to come home, to come back to Hungary. So this is what we're going to look at now. Okay, so there's a letter that Lajos sends to Eva from Budapest at the end of the year, 46. Even after so many attempts to send letters, we still don't know anything for certain. You wrote to us on August 5th, as did Agi. Both letters arrived from Enns, though according to the American telegram we received, you cannot be there. Now we don't actually know what's going on. Vera brought a baby girl into the world on July 24th. She and the baby are fine. The baby weighed 3 kilos at birth and was 53 centimeters long. Now the little angel is 3.6 kilos. This shows how healthy she is. There is enough food. Vera has bountiful milk. As for me, I am somehow managing things. The prices are not cheap, but they are manageable. Okay. The following passages come from a set of 3 letters to Laci and Kati from Budapest in early 47, which highlights the fluidity and terrible uncertainty of the situation. I suggest that you return. Pani did, she is here in Pest. Though Deju went to Germany, he's coming back here too, and he's bringing something from there. I say you come back. All the others can make ends meet, and you will make ends meet too. Pani and her family have returned for good. Clary is expecting the baby next month. It is very hard to get to America. I think it is better to create a life here. The situation is always getting better. Mostly careerists go to America, and as far as I know, you do not have such ambitions. America is a capitalist country, and we do not know whether it wants progress or destruction. 15 million Jews live there. I am afraid there will be an even bigger Auschwitz. I wish this fear to be only a nightmare, but unfortunately we cannot know anything. If you really must go somewhere, go to Palestine. Here there is nothing new. We work hard, we live, and we are well. There are some good Russian films in the cinema. I'm going tonight to see The Stone Flower. Okay. As these letters were written, the Cold War intensified. Hungary moved from what had been a kind of semi-democracy to erosion of the non-communist leadership. The other post-war political parties in Hungary were dissolved after a fixed election in August 47, which predetermined a communist win. In June 48, the Social Democratic Party was forcibly merged with the Hungarian Communist Party to become the Hungarian Workers' Party. By the summer of 1948, the Iron Curtain was rapidly moving westward, and the State of Israel had come into existence. New York's Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society was sick at heart over the developments in Poland, a country from which so many Jews would like to emigrate, and was informing itself about the regime change in Czechoslovakia. The Polish premier had already informed Hayes that as an American organization, its activities were viewed with suspicion, and it would be highly desirable for Hayes to discontinue its activities. Legal channels of immigration contracted. Jews from Hungary who now tried to leave the country sought illegal passage through Bratislava to Vienna, a route that remained partially open until mid-1949 with the knowledge of the Hungarian Ministry of the Interior. Yehuda Bauer estimates that at least 30,000 Jews fled Hungary in 1948 and 9 using the semi-legal passage through Czechoslovakia until it was sealed, and that about 50,000 Jews left Hungary between the end of the Second World War and 56. Approximately 15 to 18,000 of them emigrated clandestinely to Palestine. Many Hungarian Jews who emigrated to the newly established State of Israel saw it as a step toward eventual settlement in the U.S. The U.S. partially opened its doors in 1948 with the DP Act, which allowed 200,000 DPs in, though only those who had acquired DP status before December 22, 1945. A reform to that law passed in 1950, allowing in further refugees who had acquired DP status by January 1, 1949. "The curtain has rung down on calendar year 1949, wrote the Highest director of Germany and Austria. Highest sought to place the displaced in 1949, settling the vast majority of DPs in the US, followed with a sharp decrease in number in Canada, Australia, and other countries, many of them in South America. The intimate and compelling letters from Enns freeze this story of overwhelming rupture, migration, and geopolitical transformation in its tracks. We remember that most of all, after their bare physical needs were met, survivors craved contact. Contact was the thread of continuity, a means of chasing normalcy, of sketching out the terrain and strategies of adaptation to a destroyed world. Written in 1946 and 47, these letters capture the fluctuations and uncertainties of the years between the end of the Second World War and the drawing down of the Iron Curtain. We hear the letter writers' voices clearly before the paths diverge. So I thank you again for the opportunity to get to the YIVO archives and make that important first step in the research. Is there time for questions? Or?
We have 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you know if you were one of the first people to use the letters?
I don't know for sure. I am almost, let's say, 95% certain that I'm the first one to use the Hungarian letters, because the publications that I've seen on this period, this is a newly growing field. This is a field of growing historical research. And most of the work so far has been done on majority Jewish populations, and viewing the Jewish population as one whole. So there is a transformation that we see from Hungarian Jews, Czech Jews, Polish Jews, and so on, to just Jews in the world. And the work that's been done so far has been done in German and Yiddish and Polish and French and other more widely used languages. Hungarian always has this problem of being a tiny language swimming in the Slavic Sea, you know, so you don't think so. Yeah.
Well, when we were talking about your project, you compared the study of Jewry in Europe up to 1945 with after 1945. Could you kind of give us that picture?
Okay, so many stories. This is a great question. Many stories and histories of Jews in Europe end in 1945, and they say, oh, this is the long history of Jews in Poland, and these are the history of thriving. Or there's a great deal of work on the interwar period because it was a period of renewal, and it was an era of modern Jewish politics and the Jewish parties and engagement and the Yiddish revival and so on, and disassimilation. So there's a huge cultural movement of the interwar period. So there's a great deal of looking into that. And there's a great deal of study about the Holocaust. It's an enormous field. But there's much less that deals with the history of Jews in Europe after the Second World War. And this is really, I'll tell you why, for a long time, largely because of the Cold War situation. It was very hard to get to Eastern Europe. It was very hard to spend time there, to learn the languages, to get into the archives, to talk to people, to have relationships. It was hard to be Jewish. And after the war, after '89, the collapse of communist regimes in Europe, there was an opening up of this question. And this, I feel very fortunate to have coincided with that period of the 90s, when we could go over, and there was this great feeling of openness and access to the archives, and so with that, and with talking to people, you learn that they were there. And that there were communities that could come out now and experience some kind of revival. Ruth Gruber was here just a couple of weeks ago to talk about current Jewish life in Eastern and Central Europe. And things have changed a lot. It's been 25 years. But with that openness and with access, there were many scholars who began to look back and say, there is, even if we didn't have an open, widely known Jewish population, or even if there weren't active Jewish communities, or it wasn't possible to speak about certain topics, they were there, and the people were there. And we want to go back and understand their experience as well, to rewrite Europe into the living map, the living narrative of Jewish history. During the Cold War, I know this from my own family, Europe disappeared. Eastern Europe was gone. It wasn't a real place. It was Fiddler on the Roof, no matter where you were from. It was Anatevka, and we left there, we came here, why are you going back? That's what my grandparents told me. But you go back and you rediscover the place, and that it's a real place. And it's a process that I often refer to as de-Fiddler on the Roofization of the area, so that it becomes real. It's not just cliched kitsch from Broadway in the 1960s, but you understand that there are parameters and that there are real people who live there, and that makes that post-war period gain enormous interest. I hadn't been interested in studying the post-war period for many years because I, like many people, felt there was no Jewish life there. But this is not true. It's not true that there was no. We just have to reevaluate and rethink how we study that period. So there's a huge difference, and it can't recreate the communities that were there before the war, but we can understand the transformations, and we can try to confront the transformations and see, well, where are their continuities and where are their ruptures, and put the pieces together.
Great. So thank you so much for your presentation.